shape your soul. And that kind of transformation can never be undone. You don't need a platform to become powerful. You don't need recognition to become relevant. What you need is God's presence, God's process, and God's pace. Let the hidden season work. Let the silence do its refining. Let God write the kind of testimony that doesn't need to be explained, just witnessed. Because when he brings you out, it won't just be a comeback. It'll be a confirmation that the hiding wasn't rejection. It was a setup for a story that only grace could write. It's easy to feel discouraged when the timeline of your life doesn't match the expectation in your heart. When you're doing all you can, praying faithfully, showing up consistently, and still nothing seems to be moving. Delay can feel like a punishment when all your plans seem to be sitting still. But in the kingdom of God, delay is never denial. It's often divine alignment. God's timing isn't just about when something happens. It's about the alignment of everything around that moment to make it last, to make it right, and to make it fruitful. When God is preparing a breakthrough, he's not just thinking about you. He's aligning the people, the places, the timing, the opportunities, and even the obstacles that will shape your story. You may feel like you're standing still, but heaven is moving pieces you can't even see. Just because you don't have the answer now doesn't mean the answer isn't on the way. It means it's being aligned with more than your desire. It's being aligned with your destiny. Sometimes the thing you prayed for isn't denied. It's just waiting for you to grow into the version of you that can handle it. Divine alignment means God is not just giving you the blessing. He's preparing you for the blessing. Relationship you're hoping for? God is shaping your heart before it arrives. That opportunity you're dreaming of, God is building your character before the doors open. Delay isn't always about waiting. It's about becoming. And in that becoming, you begin to see that what God is doing in you is just as important as what he will do through you. Think about Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a dream of leadership and influence, but before the dream came to pass, Joseph faced betrayal, slavery, false accusations, in prison. Was it delay? To the natural eye, yes, but in the spiritual realm, every step was divine alignment. The pit led him to Potiphar's house. The house led to prison. The prison led to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh led him to the palace. What looked like delay was a setup. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And when the moment finally came, Joseph didn't just walk into leadership. He walked into legacy. God's alignment is not rushed by our impatience. He is not on a deadline. He's on a divine clock. A clock that ticks with purpose, not pressure. A clock that says not yet when our heart says right now. Because he sees what we can't. He knows what we don't. And his delay is often his mercy, keeping us from stepping into something before we're ready. It's not rejection, it's protection. It's not withholding, it's wisdom. When God makes you wait, he's not wasting your time. He's multiplying your impact. Many times divine alignment means you are not late. You are actually right on time for what you were born to do. You just didn't know the road would look this way. You didn't know it would take detours, heartbreak, loss, and silence. But each twist in the journey was not random. It was a part of the weaving, a thread in the story, a piece of the preparation. Sometimes what feels like your biggest interruption becomes the very thing that shapes your greatest calling. The job you lost, the relationship that ended, the door that slammed shut. These weren't just obstacles. They were alignments. There's a sacred tension in the wait. It stretches you, it refines you, it forces you to lean into God more deeply than you ever have. And while you wait, something supernatural happens. You stop asking just for outcomes and start seeking intimacy. You begin to want his presence more than his presence. And in that sacred space, delay becomes a gift. Because now your prayers aren't just for answers, they're for alignment. You start to say, God, I don't just want what I want. I want what you want, when you want, how you want. That is the heart posture divine alignment requires. What feels like a delay to you may be God rerouting the enemy's plan. Sometimes you think the door didn't open because you weren't ready, but in reality, God closed it because there was danger behind it. He sees the traps the enemy set. He hears the conversations you never did. He protects you from what could have derailed you, distracted you, or destroyed your purpose. That no was not rejection, it was redirection. That pause was not the end, it was the pivot. Divine alignment often looks like delay because God is fixing things we didn't even know were broken. You've been measuring progress by movement, but God measures it by maturity. He's asking, can you trust me when nothing changes? Can you keep walking when it's quiet? Can you keep believing when it's barren? These are the tests that come before the testimony. And when you pass them, not with perfection, but with faith, heaven aligns the next phase of your journey with precision. Because now you're not chasing blessings, you're walking in sync with the... But Sara, you may be looking at your life and thinking, I should be further along by now. But what if where you are is exactly where God needs you to be? Not for comfort, but for cultivation. Not for recognition, but for revelation. Divine alignment means you're being positioned with purpose. It means the unseen groundwork is just as important as the visible glory. And when the time is right, when the pieces fit, when your heart and His plan meet in perfect sync, the delay will suddenly make sense. What once looked like a detour will be revealed as destiny. Divine alignment changes the way you see time. You no longer live in anxiety, rushing to meet deadlines or comparing your timeline to others. You start walking in divine rhythm. You understand that late is never late when God is leading. You see that your timeline is not yours. It's authored by a God who transcends time. He does not miss appointments. He doesn't forget promises. And every tick of the clock is filled with intentionality. So when He says wait, He's not stalling. He's setting the stage. You may not understand it all now, but one day you'll look back and realize that every closed door, every delayed prayer, every long season of silence was actually aligning you with something far greater than what you had in mind. Because God's plans are not just good, they're perfect. They don't just meet your expectations, they exceed them. And what once felt like a delay will stand as proof that divine alignment was always in motion. There's a temptation in all of us to make permanent conclusions based on temporary circumstances. When life gets heavy, when heartbreak shows up, when nothing makes sense, we start to believe that the struggle we're facing is the final word. We begin to. June 18 is not just a date on the calendar, it's a divine appointment. It's a moment marked in heaven, a point in time where God is preparing to interrupt what was and introduce what will be. This sermon is a prophetic declaration for every soul who has been walking through uncertainty, feeling forgotten, or waiting in faith while fighting in silence. June 18 is about more than change. It's about divine alignment, breakthrough, and story reversal. Get ready to see the hand of God move in a way that shifts the entire direction of your life. Your delay was not denial. It was divine preparation for a destined shift. What looked like a pause was never a punishment. It was process. What felt like rejection was really redirection. Because when God decides to write a testimony, He often begins with silence. And in the silence, He watches how you wait. In the quiet moments when no one claps, no one texts back, no one sees the tears, and no one knows the battles you're fighting in your own mind, He is watching, shaping, and preparing. Delay is heaven's signal that something bigger than you can imagine is being built behind the scenes. When you've been stuck in a season for so long, it starts to feel like identity. You stop expecting the door to open. You stop believing the phone will ring. You stop dreaming like you used to. But what you don't realize is that sometimes God will allow delay, not because you're not ready to receive, but because He is preparing the environment to receive you. Your next chapter isn't just about your readiness. It's about divine timing and alignment that puts you exactly where you were always meant to be. There's something about being delayed that humbles you, that strips you of pride and performance. You stop relying on your own strength and start leaning on his voice. You start to listen more closely. You become more sensitive to his whispers. Delay doesn't feel good, but it refines your discernment. It detaches you from the applause of the crowd and anchors you to the approval of God. It matures your faith from needing to see results to trusting the one who holds the results. You thought the delay was punishment. You thought maybe God forgot you, but baby, if only you knew the amount of angels assigned to your next chapter. If only you knew the doors that are being constructed, the enemies being silenced, the chains being broken. The delay is evidence that something is shifting because the enemy doesn't fight what isn't a threat. And the warfare you've been facing in the delay has been a clear signal. There's glory on the other side of this. God allows delay because rushed blessings break easily. But what he is doing in you is going to last. He's forming endurance, character, vision. He's teaching you how to handle power with humility. He's preparing you to carry glory without arrogance. He's making sure you don't get to the promise and forget who gave it to you. Delay gives you room to grow, to grieve, to heal, to stretch. It gives God time to work all things together for your good. Even the things you cried over, even the things that didn't make sense. Some of your greatest growth happened in delay. You just didn't see it because you were looking for movement, but God was doing root work. He was anchoring you deeper in his word, making you more resilient, more spiritually alert. You thought you were losing time, but you were gaining wisdom. You thought the waiting was wasting your years, but God was protecting you from premature elevation. He knew what kind of pressure your next level would bring, so he let you build strength in the dark. And now the shift is near. June 18 is the day where the preparation meets the promise. It's the moment where all of heaven agrees. It's time. The things that were delayed will suddenly align. The phone calls will come. The opportunities will flow. But you'll be different now. Because the delay didn't just keep you from something. It built something in you. You'll step into rooms you used to cry over. You'll sit at tables you prayed for. But you'll enter with wisdom, with peace, and with gratitude, born from the long wait. So don't look at delay with bitterness. Look at it with reverence. God trusted you with a slow season because he knew you wouldn't give up. He knew you'd still praise him when it didn't make sense. He knew you'd stay faithful when the answer was not yet. And now, because you endured the delay, you're ready for the destiny. This next chapter isn't rushed. It's released. It's not temporary. It's time. And it's not going to break you. It's going to bless you beyond what you thought possible. So get ready. God is about to change your story on June 18th, not because you earned it, but because he prepared you for it. There's a sacred power in the seasons of your life that no one sees, the ones where the spotlight is turned off, the crowd is gone, and it's just you and God wrestling, healing, becoming. Hidden seasons are punishment. They are preparation. It's in these moments where it looks like nothing is happening on the outside that God is doing the deepest work on the inside, because while the world celebrates outcomes, God develops character. While people praise platforms, God cultivates patience. Hidden seasons are the birthplace of unshakable testimonies. When a woman is carrying a baby, she doesn't announce the pregnancy on the first day she conceives. The baby grows in silence, in darkness, inside her. No one can see it, but something is forming. And just like that, God sometimes places his purpose in you and hides you, not to harm you, but to grow you in a safe place. The hidden season protects you from premature exposure. It shields your process from opinion. It gives you permission to develop before you debut. In hidden seasons, you're not overlooked. You're being overshadowed by the hand of God. You're not forgotten. You're being focused. And the silence you feel is not God's absence. It's his strategy. He's teaching you how to walk by faith and not by sight. He's teaching you how to serve with no recognition, how to trust with no validation, how to show up for your calling without needing applause. These are the seasons that build endurance. These are the moments that forge real anointing. You may feel like you've been buried, but what if you've been planted? The difference between buried and planted is expectation. When a seed is buried, it's forgotten. But when a seed is planted, it's hidden with purpose. It's covered so that it can break open and produce. Your tears, your prayers, your worship when no one was wasted. You were being planted for a harvest that would speak louder than your pain ever. And God was using the hidden season to grow your roots before revealing your fruit. Some of the strongest voices in faith didn't start on stages. They were born in secret places. David was anointed in front of his family, but he was developed in fields with sheep. Moses led a nation, but first he wandered in obscurity for 40 years. Jesus himself spent 30 years in anonymity before 3 years in ministry. There is power in the hidden place. There is clarity in the quiet. There is grace in the grind. When God is writing your testimony, he always begins in the shadows, because what he builds in private, he blesses in public. There are lessons you only learn when it's just you and God. In the hidden place, you find out who you are when there's no audience to impress. You confront your fears, your insecurities, your broken places. You learn how to depend on God in ways success can never teach. You grow a prayer life that doesn't perform, it perseveres. You don't just worship because the music plays. You worship because it's all you've got. And in that place, your faith becomes real. It becomes raw. It becomes strong enough to sustain the blessing when it comes. 100 seasons strip away your need for control. They confront the illusion that you have to always be seen to be significant. You start to realize that visibility is not the same as value. Just because they don't see your effort doesn't mean God hasn't recorded it. Just because they didn't notice your growth doesn't mean heaven didn't celebrate it. God has a record of every quiet yes you whispered in prayer, every tear you cried into a pillow. Every time you kept going when quitting felt easier. And he's building a testimony that will speak louder than anything you could have scripted yourself. When the testimony finally unfolds, people may say it happened overnight, but you'll know the truth. It happened in silence. It was born in hidden seasons. The strength they admire was forged in weakness. The wisdom they hear came from nights you questioned everything. The confidence they see came after you faced rejection, fear, and failure, but still chose to believe. Your hidden season built layers they can't measure. And when the spotlight finally hits your story, the oil on your life will reflect more than success. It will reflect survival, surrender, and supernatural strength. We live in a culture obsessed with being seen. Social media teaches us that value is measured in views, likes, shares. But God is not moved by what's trending. He is moved by what is true. And truth is built when no one is watching. When you serve without recognition, forgive without applause, pray without praise, that's when heaven takes notice. And in due time, the testimony that comes from your hidden season will not just bless you. It will heal others. People will see your strength and find hope. They will hear your journey and realize they're not alone. And that's the beauty of hidden seasons. They don't just prepare you for promotion, they prepare you to carry others. Because you remember what it felt like to be unseen. You remember the pain of being misunderstood, the loneliness of the in-between, the ache of waiting. And that memory keeps your heart soft, your faith authentic, and your leadership humble. Hidden seasons don't just change your story. They define ourselves by the chapter we're in. But the truth is, your story is still unfolding. God is not finished writing. This moment is not the full picture. And the chapter you're living through now may be the very setup for the breakthrough you've been praying for. It's human nature to label our lives by our current pain. If you're going through a season of grief, it can feel like life will never be joyful again. If you're in a financial struggle, it's easy to believe that lack will always be part of your identity. If you're waiting for healing, it can seem like sickness has the last word. But God never writes a story that ends in hopelessness. What feels like an ending to you is often a transition to something greater in his plan. Consider the woman in scripture with the issue of blood. For 12 years, she was identified by her condition. That was a chapter. She was unclean, excluded, isolated. Everyone around her probably saw her as broken, forgotten, cursed. But when she touched the hem of Jesus' garment, everything changed. In one moment, her chapter shifted. Not just her body, but her identity was restored. She went from being known by her issue to being celebrated for her faith. The world judged her based on the chapter they saw, but God knew the full story he was writing. When you judge your worth based on your current chapter, you limit your faith. Because you assume that what you see now is all there will ever be, but God sees beyond now. He sees the full arc of your purpose, the hidden lessons, the divine connections, the power that will come from your pain. Your chapter today may be full of confusion, but the chapter coming may be one of clarity. Today may be sorrowful, but joy is being drafted for the next page. You just can't stop reading your life because one page is difficult. God is an author who specializes in plot twists. He takes what the enemy meant for evil and rewrites it for good. He turns slaves into leaders, shepherd boys into kings, and barren women into mothers of nations. No chapter is wasted in his hands. Even the ones filled with heartbreak and mistakes are used to build a redemptive story. So when life feels hard, remind yourself this is a chapter, not the conclusion. And if God is still writing, then hope still lives. We live in a world obsessed with snapshots. People post the best chapters of their lives on social media, the highlights, the celebrations, the victories. And if you're not careful, you'll compare your rough draft to someone else's final copy. You'll think something is wrong with you because your current chapter is full of questions while theirs looks like answers. But what you see online is not the whole book. Everyone has chapters they don't post. Everyone has pages of pain and paragraphs of prayer that led to the picture-perfect moments. Don't compare your story. Honor your process. God doesn't just write stories. He develops character. Your current chapter might be uncomfortable, not because you're being punished, but because you're being prepared. Character is built in the quiet. Maturity is developed in the messy middle. Trust is deepened when you can't see the way forward but choose to believe anyway. That's why God allows you to sit in chapters that don't feel good, because he's not just interested in what happens to you, he's shaping who you're becoming. And what you become in this chapter will determine how you handle the next one. Sometimes we rush through hard chapters because we want the relief that comes with the resolution, but there's gold in the grit. There are lessons in the valley that the mountaintop can never teach you. In fact, some of the most transformational parts of your story will come from the seasons where you had to press forward with tears in your eyes and faith in your heart. Where you didn't feel strong, but God was your strength. Where nothing made sense, but you worshiped anyway. Those are the moments that shape your legacy. You may not like the current chapter, but trust the author. He knows the ending. He's already written the victory, and he promises that all things, not some things, not easy things, all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. That means even this chapter, the one you'd rather skip, has purpose. Even this moment filled with uncertainty or pain is not wasted. It's working for you. It's adding weight to your testimony. It's giving your story depth and dimension. There's a phrase often used in writing, development arc. It means the character changes over time. The trials they face transform them. Their experiences shape who they become by the end of the story. That's what God is doing in your life. You are being developed. Every decision, every challenge, every delay, and every deliverance is part of your arc. You won't be who you were. You're evolving into the person God saw when he first breathed purpose into you. So don't despise the chapter that's developing you. Embrace it. Let it teach you. Let it mold you. One of the greatest tricks of the enemy is to convince you to close the book early, to stop believing, to stop hoping, to walk away from your purpose because the page you're on feels too painful. But don't give him that victory. Keep turning the page, keep showing up, keep writing with your faith and living with expectation. The best part of your story may still be ahead, but you'll never know if you stop in the middle. The pain you feel now might be the very pressure that births your greatest promise. God is not in a rush because he's building something eternal. What he's writing in your life isn't a short story, it's a legacy. And legacy takes time. It takes refinement. It takes rewriting. There may be edits, there may be pauses, there may be entire seasons that feel like silence, but God is still writing, and he writes with redemption. Even your worst chapters, the ones filled with shame, sin, or sorrow, can be rewritten by grace. That's the power of divine authorship. He turns ashes into beauty. He turns pages of despair into declarations of hope. So don't let this chapter lie to you. Don't let it tell you your story is over. Don't let it convince you that God has forgotten. He's still with you. He's still working. And the same God who is with you in chapter 1 will be with you in your final chapter. He is Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And he's also present in the middle, the messy, unfinished, painful middle. That's where miracles are born. That's where transformation happens. That's where your faith becomes sight. When you begin to see your life as a story God is still writing, you start to live with a holy patience. You don't panic at every plot twist. You don't crumble when a scene doesn't go your way. You trust the pen in God's hand. You believe that the one who wrote the stars into the sky is writing something beautiful in you too. And even if you don't understand the chapter, you trust the heart of the author. Oh, soften. In life, we believe that the reason nothing is moving is because God hasn't moved yet. We convince ourselves that if God would just show us a sign, open a door, speak audibly, or shake the heavens, then we'd know it's time. But the reality is, many times we're not actually waiting on God. He's waiting on us, waiting for us to rise up, take a step, trust again, dream again, move beyond fear, and act in obedience. God's plans are ready. The purpose is in place. The blessing is prepared. Heaven responds to faith, not hesitation. When we read the stories of faith in the Bible, we find a pattern. God moves in response to movement. When the priest stepped into the Jordan River, the water parted, not before. When Peter stepped out of the boat, he walked on water, not before. When the woman with the issue of blood reached out, she was healed, not before. Their breakthrough wasn't waiting for a divine spotlight. It was waiting for a bold step. And the same applies to us. Sometimes what you're praying for is already within reach. It's your step of faith that activates it. Too many of us are sitting in seasons of delay, not because God said wait, but because we said, I'm not ready. We're hesitating because we don't feel qualified, because we fear rejection, because we're holding on to wounds that haven't healed yet. And so we call it waiting on God, but what's really happening is fear disguised as patience. Faith isn't passive, it's active. It's forward movement, even when you don't see the outcome. It's trusting that God will meet you on the way, even if he hasn't told you every detail. God doesn't give full instructions. He gives direction. He says, move, and we want maps. But God is not in the business of comforting our control issues. He's building our faith. If you had all the answers, there would be no room for trust. So he often leads us step by step, revelation by revelation, knowing that what grows in the journey is just as important as the destination. Your next step may feel risky, but it might be the very door to your next dimension. Faith will always require movement. That doesn't mean recklessness. It means obedience. That means doing the thing God told you to do even when the results aren't guaranteed. It means showing up to the interview even if you've been rejected before. It means applying to school again, launching the business, starting the ministry, writing the book, having the hard conversation, saying yes when everything in you wants to say not yet. Because faith doesn't wait for perfect condition. Faith says if God said it, that settles it, and it moves. Let's look at Abraham. God told him to go to a land he would show him, not a land. He'd already mapped out, not a destination with a brochure and reviews, a land he would see only after walking. Can you imagine the courage it takes to leave everything familiar for something invisible? But Abraham obeyed. He stepped into the unknown because he trusted the one who was sending him. And that step didn't just change his life, it changed generations. That's the kind of legacy faith that's waiting to be released in you, but it starts with movement. When we hesitate, we often spiritualize our stagnation. We say things like, I'm just waiting for confirmation, or God hasn't spoken yet, when in reality, God has already spoken. We're just afraid to move. And the danger is that delay can become disobedience. When God puts a word in your spirit, there's a window, an appointed time. And sometimes we miss that moment, not because we didn't hear, but because we didn't act. God doesn't need to repeat himself when he's already spoken clearly. He needs our obedience, not our delay. Think about Moses at the Red Sea. He had millions of people behind him and an ocean in front of him. God didn't say, stop and cry. He said, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to move forward. Move forward into what? Into the water, into what seemed impossible, into what looked like a dead end. But obedience brought the miracle. Movement created the way. If Moses had waited for the sea to split before stepping, they would have died waiting. But when they moved forward, the impossible made room for them. Some of the breakthroughs you're begging God for are waiting on your yes. That relationship healing, that next opportunity, that level of influence, that door of favor. But they won't manifest in your comfort zone. They are attached to a step, a scary, uncomfortable, uncertain step. And you have to ask yourself, how long will I stay stuck in fear before I trust God enough to move? Because if you truly believe that God is who he says he is, then obedience should be your automatic response, not your last resort. Even Jesus, in his humanity, had to take a step in faith. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed for the cup to pass, but then he said, not my will, but yours be done. And then he got up. He didn't get a lightning bolt from heaven or an angelic choir. He got up with tears and agony, but he moved. And that movement changed the world. Your obedience may not feel glorious. It may not be accompanied by applause, but it could be the most sacred yes of your life. The enemy loves to keep you stuck in indecision because he knows that movement threatens his plan. As long as you hesitate, he can distract you. As long as you delay, he can discourage you. But the moment you move in faith, all of heaven backs you up. The moment you take a step, chains start breaking. The moment you shift your posture from waiting to walking, miracles begin to follow. Because faith moves heaven, faith gets God's attention. Faith aligns you with what he's already prepared. It's time to stop blaming God for your lack of movement. It's time to stop saying you're waiting when what you're really doing is avoiding. Avoiding the hard work, avoiding the potential for failure, avoiding the vulnerability of being seen. But growth requires risk, and risk requires trust, and trust requires a decision. Will I stay where it's safe, or will I step into what's sacred? Will I remain in comfort, or will I walk into calling? There's power in your movement. Heaven partners with your steps. God is not looking for perfect people. He's looking for obedient ones. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to be flawless. You just need to move. Trust that God will meet you in the motion. That as you walk, he will provide. As you obey, he will reveal. As you act, he will guide. When God steps into your life to change your story, he doesn't just rewrite the plot. He restores the person. He doesn't just give you a new season. He gives you a new name, a new lens, a new sense of self. Because for too long, too many of us have been living with identities shaped by pain, shaped by trauma, shaped by who walked away, by what went wrong, by who didn't see us, by what we thought we had to become to survive. But God is not in the business of superficial edits. He's in the business of complete restoration. And when he starts changing your story, the first thing he reclaims is your identity. You may have thought this was just about getting to the next level in life, getting a breakthrough, a promotion, a blessing, a relationship, a door opened. But what God is doing is deeper than that. He's taking you back to who you were before life happened, before you got wounded, before you were rejected, before the labels stuck, before you started shrinking, before you started performing for approval. He's restoring you to your original identity, the one he designed in secret, the one he spoke over you in eternity, the one he never forgot even when you did. There are moments when you look at your reflection and barely recognize yourself, because life, with all its trials and battles, has a way of distorting your view, and you begin to define yourself by what you've been through instead of what God has said. But when God starts changing your story, he lifts the veil of false identity. He exposes the lies you believed, that you were not enough, that you had to earn love, that you were damaged, forgotten, overlooked. And he begins to speak truth into your soul until you start to see yourself the way he sees you. Think about Jacob, a man who spent most of his life trying to be someone else. First deceiving his father to steal a blessing, then running from the consequences, then living under a name that meant supplanter, trickster. But when he wrestled with God, he didn't just get a blessing, he got a new name. You will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. God didn't just change his situation, he changed his identity. And for many of us, that's what this season is about. It's about the wrestle, the breaking, the confrontation between who we've become and who we were always meant to be. Restoration is messy because it uncovers what's been hidden. It brings to light the insecurities, the fears, the false masks we wear to function. But God doesn't expose to shame. He exposes to He breaks us to rebuild us. He strips us to clothe us in truth. He pulls back the layers of who we pretended to be so that we can finally embrace who we actually are. And that version of you, the one God is bringing forth, is more powerful, more whole, more radiant than anything you've known. We often resist this process because it doesn't feel like breakthrough. It feels like breakdown. It feels like losing control, like losing the people we used to impress, like being misunderstood. But that's because identity restoration requires disconnection from the old. God cannot give you the fullness of your new identity while you're still clinging to the validation of your past one. So he begins to sever attachments. He removes crutches. He silences the voices that used to influence you, not to punish you, but to position you, to make space for the real you to rise. When God called Gideon, he didn't speak to who he thought he was. He spoke to who he actually was. Gideon saw himself as weak, the least in his family, hiding from responsibility. But the angel said, "Mighty warrior." God didn't wait for Gideon to feel like a warrior before calling him one. Because identity is not based on feelings, it's based on divine truth. And many of us are in a season where